Hey guys, tonight we're plunging headfirst into the ink-stained, scroll-stuffed world of Byzantine bureaucracy. Yep, it's as glamorous as it sounds. You're waking up in Constantinople, capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, and let's just say, you probably won't survive this job without either a neck cramp or a slow existential crisis. Picture it. A hazy early morning, smog from olive oil lamps lingering in the air, the muffled clang of church bells echoing through steep alleyways. You got the soft rustle of pigeons above, and the even softer dread in your chest because today, like every day, you work for the Empire, in an office, with paper, endless, soul-eating paper. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and time zone in the comments. I want to see how many of you are falling asleep across the world tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're late. Again, the candle you meant to relight has long since guttered out. You're yanked awake by the clanging of your upstairs neighbor's chamber pot being dumped out the window. Constantinople, city of enlightenment and frequent splash zones. Groggy and slightly damp, you shuffle across the creaky floor of your rented upstairs room, pausing to locate both your shoes and your will to live. Today, you're scheduled for another full shift in the Anaphora office, which sounds majestic, but is basically where petitions from provincial landowners go to die. Your job, review appeals, decode bureaucratic Greek, and make sure some farmer in Bithynia isn't trying to scam the empire out of a barley tax. Again. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine bureaucracy was truly efficient or simply designed to confuse everyone into passive compliance. One thing's certain, it's very, very good at killing time. You yank on your dull blue tunic, the color of middle-ranking civil servants, not noble enough for crimson, not low enough for brown, and check for ink stains from yesterday. There they are, right under the armpit. Great. Your belt is twisted, your sandals are mismatched, and your breakfast is 3 olives and a sip of leftover mulled wine. Perfectly miserable. Perfectly Byzantine. The walk to work is a slow one, winding through side alleys where stray cats eye you with more authority than your supervisor. You pass a small shrine to St. Basil with a half-burnt candle and an offering of dried figs. You pop one in your mouth, whisper an apology, and keep going. As you approach the vast bulk of the imperial offices, stone arches, flaking mosaics, the smell of moldy papyrus, you begin to hear the familiar sound of public misery, the thwap of sandals on stone, the muttered curses of tax collectors, and the droning chant of a record keeper reciting names from a census list that no one asked for. It's going to be a long day. You squeeze past a priest arguing with the merchant over fish tariffs and duck into the shadowy hall of the civil archives. Your desk is there, right where you left it, piled high with scrolls, sealed reports, and a half-eaten honey cake that's definitely not yours, but is also definitely going to be yours now. The first scroll on your desk is marked urgent in bright red wax, which you know from experience means absolutely nothing. You crack the seal and begin reading. It's an appeal from a minor noble claiming exemption from grain taxes because his family once lent a donkey to Emperor Theophilos. Sure. You mark it pending and move on. The air inside the office is humid, with body heat and stale ink. A scribe nearby dips his pen into a pot of indigo dye and splatters it onto his robes with a very audible sigh. The intern 2 desks over has already dozed off, his face smushed against the page of fiscal exemptions. Someone, somewhere, is singing. Badly. You peek over the partition to see a low-level accounts officer humming a psalm and stamping documents with the speed of a tortoise on sedatives. You consider hurling a papyrus roll at him, but then you remember the time he cried over a broken stylus and decide against it. The day has officially begun, and you are officially trapped. Your boss, Domesticos Leon, appears around mid-morning. He's a squat, humorless man, with a mustache like a broom and the social charm of a damp rag. He grunts something that might be morning, then dumps a new stack of scrolls on your desk with the casual malice of someone who knows your back already hurts. Need these sorted by sundown, he mutters, and don't forget the provincial border update forms. Armenia's changed again. Armenia always changes. One scroll is so old the papyrus crumbles under your fingers. You gently try to read the text. something about a land boundary dispute near Nicomedia, adjudicated by someone named Giannis the Slightly Reliable. Sounds promising. You note that the boundary was marked by an olive tree of great dignity, which you file mentally under absurd but adorable. A fringe tidbit floats to mind. Did you know that imperial scribes sometimes sharpen their pens with their teeth? You test the theory. Oof, nope, bad idea. At around noon, a courier bursts in carrying a dispatch from Thessalonica, flailing dramatically like he's being chased by a horde of Huns. He's not, he's just really sweaty. Important message, he pants, before collapsing theatrically. No one looks up. You fish the scroll from his limp fingers. It's a requisition for 47 bolts of imperial purple linen, possibly for a wedding, or possibly because someone in the palace spilled wine. Either way, not your department. You redirect it with a doodle of a disapproving owl and move on. Your stomach grumbles. The honey cake stares at you. So far today, you've read 12 land disputes, approved 5 grain shipment forms, and silently judged the handwriting of every monk east of the Bosphorus. The sun outside is high. You still have 6 hours to go. And someone just knocked over the inkwell. The inkwell explodes like a squid in panic. Thick black puddles soak the edge of your parchment stack, and you lunge forward with a squeak that's deeply undignified for a man wearing a toga. You snatch up the nearest scroll, only to smear a perfect fingerprint right across the official seal of the Office of Inland Revenues. Awesome. That one's definitely going to come back and haunt you during audit season. As you mop up the disaster with a rag that probably hasn't been washed since iconoclasm ended, you realize you're still wearing only one sandal. The other must have fallen off somewhere between home and the office, which is both classic you and classic Byzantium. Never fully put together, but somehow still functioning. Your clothing situation isn't helping. The official civil service tunic itches like you're being slowly exercised, and the belt rope keeps slipping. At this point, you've tied it in 5 different knots, one of which may actually be a minor heresy. You cinch it tight again and mutter your daily prayer to Saint Menace, patron of lost objects and hopefully dignity. Historians still argue whether Byzantine officials had a strict daily dress code or if the empire just slowly settled into a uniform of functional frump. What's clear is this: nobody looks good in empire blue, especially when it's wrinkled and dotted with ink spots shaped suspiciously like Constantinople. The sandals? Technically government issued, which means they're both uncomfortable and wildly inconsistent in quality. One is sturdy leather with a brass clasp. The other feels like it was made from chewed goat hide and sheer spite. Together, they form the official footwear of civil despair. Still, you press on. You can hear the rhythmic stomp of the palace guards changing shift outside. More majestic than you'll ever be, even on your best day. And a snide voice at the desk behind you starts gossiping again. It's Nikitas. Of course it's Nikitas. Did you hear, he stage whispers, loud enough for an amphitheater, that the notary of licenses has been caught misfiling his receipts? On purpose, to delay the quota. You sigh. Nikitas lives for this. He's one of those coworkers who thinks working in a crumbling imperial bureaucracy is the same as being in a political thriller. He leans over your partition, somehow already holding a fig. I give it a week before he's reassigned to pigeon inspection duty. He smirks. Some of us are trying to fix the empire, you murmur. He pretends not to hear, and starts telling you about his cousin, who once saw the Empress's servant at a bakery. Scandalous. Meanwhile, you flip open. You stare at it for 10 long seconds. Blink. Move on. A side note. One obscure record mentions that Emperor Constantine VII insisted all official reports be written in uncial script only, the slowest, loopiest, hand-cramping style known to man. You've trained in 3 different handwriting styles and still can't read your supervisor's notes half the time. Honestly, you're beginning to suspect Leon just doodles fish whenever he forgets how to spell monastery. By mid-morning, the corridor outside has erupted into quiet chaos. Some minor official's toga has come undone mid-conversation and is now wrapped around one ankle like an ancient Roman fashion statement gone horribly wrong. A young scribe is running in slow, silent panic, holding a flaming taper and a fresh writ, and someone's dropped a pile of papyrus sheets down the central stairwell. They flutter slowly, like bureaucratic snowflakes. You sneak away to the clerk's lounge. And by lounge, you mean a cramped stone alcove with a cracked basin, a stub of soap, and a single fig tree drawn on the wall with charcoal. There's also a bench that smells like vinegar and despair. You sit. The robe rides up again. The imperial office diet is bare bones. If you're lucky, someone brings in sesame biscuits from the market. If you're unlucky, like today, it's just dried fish and an oil-soaked bean paste that smells like it was fermented under a bishop. You nibble anyway. Your body has mostly forgotten what flavor is. A pale shaft of sunlight filters through a stained glass slit, warming the tip of your scroll case. It's almost peaceful. Until the door creaks open and 2 junior officials burst in, arguing furiously about whether wax colors have legal implications. They do, the first one insists. Red is for emergency notices. Since when? The second counters. Purple is royal. Red is just dramatic. You slide sideways on the bench and pretend to be part of the furniture. This is what passes for office culture here. Mild food poisoning, chronic ink stains, and ongoing debates about administrative chromatics. In an ideal world, this would be the point where someone offers coffee. But this is 10th century Byzantium. You'll settle for rainwater and dreams. You head back to your desk just in time to find a new pile of scrolls waiting, delivered by an old courier who looks like he was born during the reign of Heraclius. He doesn't say anything, just raises an eyebrow and shuffles off, his knees popping like castanets. You sit. Again. The tunic bunches up. Again. And then you spot it. A form stamped with an imperial eagle, which either means something major is happening, or someone just used the fancy seal because it was lying around. You crack it open like it's a cursed relic. Dozens of scribes across the empire will now need to send updates to every rural village, from Edessa to Ephesus. You whisper a prayer for the future poultry-related appeals you'll have to process. You know they're coming. They always come. Nicetas leans over again. I give it 3 days before someone tries to claim a rooster as a religious official, he smirks. And you laugh. Just a little. Because it's funny. Because it's true. Because you know deep down that it's probably already happened. You stare at the chicken tax notice for what feels like a full minute. The wording is vague, bureaucratic, and somehow deeply threatening. All live poultry transactions within imperial limits shall henceforth be taxed at a rate commensurate with volumetric evaluation. Volumetric evaluation. For chickens. You're not even sure how to measure a chicken's volume. Do you dunk it in water like a squawking amphora? Before you can spiral any further, your nostrils twitch. That smell. It's back. Boiled ink and soggy parchment, the perfume of your profession. Somewhere in the building, a clerk must have reheated yesterday's ink in a brass pot. The acrid scent of old gall and vinegar wafts through the corridor, mingling with damp scroll glue and the faint ghost of mildew. You fan your sleeve in front of your nose like a noblewoman at a fish market. Welcome to the Byzantine civil service, where the paper is sacred and the ventilation is not. Your desk is now surrounded by a fortress of scroll tubes, each one labeled with a wax seal and a vague title like Boundary Revisions, Northwestern Themes, Volume 57B, or Urgent, Tithes. The third one just says Mysic Livestock Incidents. You don't want to know. As you open a scroll from a magistrate in Antioch, a droplet of ancient ink flakes off the corner and lands in your tea. You drink it anyway. That's where you are now, spiritually and physically. The content of the scroll is worse than the taste. A long, meandering land dispute between two cousins fighting over a fig orchard and the right to use a particular goat path. The testimonies have been transcribed in such tiny, cramped handwriting that you squint until your forehead folds like parchment. At one point, the scribe seems to switch to a regional dialect of Greek that even the translator clearly gave up on, because halfway through someone has written ? Clarify later, in the margin. Spoiler, they never did. You rub your temple. A drop of ink falls from your hairline onto the scroll. It looks like punctuation. You leave it. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine system was over-centralized or just aggressively perfectionist. One camp says it was obsessed with micromanaging everything from boat taxes to monk beard length. Another says it was simply ahead of its time in regulating chaos. Both agree on one thing. It produced a lot of paperwork. There's a knock at your partition. You glance up. A junior courier, probably 12, maybe 13, stands there holding a leather document pouch with a nervous expression and ink on his teeth. He says nothing, just holds it out like a peace offering. You take the pouch, open it, and pull out a single form, still damp from rain or tears. Hard to tell in this job. It's a reassignment order. You are now responsible for processing an additional district, Outer Chalcis and adjacent marshes. Terrific. You now officially cover the muddiest region in all of Thrace. You sigh loud enough that Nikitas actually looks up from filing his gossip scrolls. Marsh duty? He asks. You nod. He winces, gives you a pity fig, and goes back to pretending to do math on a broken abacus. Midday hits like a dropped amphora. Somewhere above you, pigeons are cooing on the windowsill, or possibly fighting over a forgotten crust. You can't tell. You lean back in your stool, which creaks ominously, and gaze around the office. Across from you, a board assistant is carving a tiny face into the end of a wax seal stick. Another one is using their stylus to scratch death to paper into the underside of a scroll tube. It's not even subtle. That tube will be mailed to the eastern provinces tomorrow. You feel it coming. The existential dip. The dreaded moment every day when you question everything. Your career, your choices, your persistent scroll rash. You stare into space for a solid 5 minutes, watching a cobweb sway in the corner, and listening to the sad scrape of parchment being unrolled too many times. And then, salvation. Well, sort of. A messenger bursts in, breathless and disheveled, holding a bright blue scroll tube. Blue means palace. Blue means important. He trips on the doorway, nearly drops the scroll, and slams it onto your desk like it owes him money. Priority, he pants, and runs off. You crack the seal. The scroll inside is fresh, sharp-edged, and smells faintly of rose water and stress. It's a report from a provincial commander complaining that his district has received 3 different versions of the same census list, all with different totals. One version says there are 87 taxable families. One says 113. The third simply reads, "Ask the monk." You do not want to ask the monk. The commander has written in angry capital letters, "I cannot tax phantoms. Send help." You write back in the approved diplomatic tone. "Thank you for your concern. Your report will be reviewed by the prefect of census consistency in due time. In the meantime, please refrain from public executions or goat-based retaliation." You file it under "Too Weird to Solve," also known as the entire drawer. Fun fact, one obscure entry from the records of the theme of Opsikion suggests that once, an entire village inflated its You check the time, not with a clock, those are for churches and astrologers, but by how far the shadow has crawled across your filing shelf. You still got a few hours before lunch. You hear a sneeze, loud, wet, unapologetic. You glance left. A courier is sniffling, rubbing his nose with the edge of his tunic, and placing a stack of wet scrolls directly onto the document table. "Oh no," someone whispers. "The mildew prophecy is fulfilled. The mildew prophecy was foretold, though preferably not so moistly." A chorus of groans rises from your neighboring desks as the courier, still glistening with his own nasal rebellion, drops scroll after soggy scroll onto the central filing slab. You stare in muted horror. Those scrolls are leaking. A puddle of snot-water ink is blooming under them like a blooming metaphor for institutional decay. Niketis, ever the drama scribe, gags audibly. You step forward, gingerly, like the floor might collapse under the weight of collective despair, and attempt to salvage what you can. Of the 6 scrolls, 2 are already beyond recovery, warped, illegible, and permanently fused at one end. The others are salvageable, if you consider blotchy text and biological contamination salvageable. You wrap them in cloth, scribble, retranscribe urgent-ish on a tag, and slap it in the out tray. Let some junior clerk deal with the sneeze scrolls. You've already mentally quit this job 4 times today. Then you hear it. Low, conspiratorial whispering. You glance up. There they are, your fellow bureaucrats, not working, again. Huddled behind the marble column by the filing desk, whispering in that particular tone that only civil servants and fishmongers seem to master, half gossip, half political speculation, with just enough malice to keep it interesting. It's Gaios, the paranoid file clerk, and Eudokia, mistress of the Misplaced Petition Recovery Division, which is a fancy title for a department that mostly sits on documents until they become irrelevant. She sent him a fig, Eudokia is hissing, eyes wide. Not just a fig, a sugared fig, Gaios replies gravely. Oh, you hear someone else murmur. That means something. You roll your eyes so hard they practically scroll themselves. It's true, though. This place runs on gossip more than grain. Every small act, every fig, every glance, every skipped line in a form is fuel for an endless machine of office intrigue. The imperial administration may have conquered provinces, repelled invasions, and preserved Roman law for centuries, but it absolutely cannot handle someone switching desks without triggering a 6-person whisper circle and a forged personnel memo. You try to tune them out and return to your next scroll. It's been sealed 3 times and countersigned by a bishop, a mid-level accountant, and, confusingly, a tavern owner. Inside, it outlines a formal complaint about tax discrepancies in the fish markets of Chrysopolis. Someone is accusing someone else of counting the same fish twice. You sigh. Not again. Historians still argue whether Byzantine civil offices were hotbeds of corruption, or simply systems so tangled that mistakes became indistinguishable from fraud. Some think minor bribery was practically encouraged, streamlining the empire, one discrete envelope at a time. You wouldn't know. You haven't even been offered a bribe today. The most scandalous thing that's landed on your desk is a tax form with a doodle of St. George fighting what appears to be a bureaucratic hydra. Speaking of mythical beasts, a commotion erupts at the back of the office. A door slams. Sandals slap furiously against the floor. Then, wheezing. You peer over the divider. A breathless clerk from the subdivision of distant property disputes bursts in, red in the face and waving a rolled parchment like a sword. Who reassigned the Rhodope files to the Armeniacon office? A deadly silence follows. Then, Eudokia shrugs, completely unfazed. Not me. Niketis leans back in his seat with a grin. Must have been the fig. The new guy, Fails maybe, collapses into a chair, huffing like a winded donkey, and drops the parchment onto your desk. This belongs to your department now, he wheezes. You blink. I'm not in the Armeniacon division. You are now, he says. And just like that, you've been laterally promoted by sheer force of confusion. Welcome to the Byzantine way. A fringe tidbit for you. There's actually a surviving letter from the 10th century in which a clerk wrote, "I have no idea who I work for anymore, but I am still being paid, so I will not complain." Legend. You examine the new Rhodope file. It's another border dispute. Shocking, truly, with 2 families claiming the same grazing hill. But one family claims their oxen recognize the land as ancestral. What does that even mean? Did the oxen say something? You jot a note in the margin. Request oxen testimony. Clarify if possible. Somewhere, someone coughs directly onto a tax ledger. It's about this time you start noticing the small details around your workspace. The ancient cobweb high in the corner that somehow survived 3 reigns of emperors. The half-burnt candle stub from last week's blackout. The tiny notch carved into your desk, where someone, long ago, must have sharpened their stylus out of boredom. You run your fingers over it and feel strangely connected to your forgotten predecessor. You hope they escaped. A commotion outside the window breaks your trance. You glance out and catch the tail end of a shouting match between a monk and a grain inspector. From what you can tell, they're arguing about whether blessed grain is exempt from taxation. The monk is shaking a loaf of bread like a weapon. You return to title after title. Land use claims, inheritance filings, imperial pigeon releases. That one's real. You lose yourself in the rhythm, scratch, dip, seal, roll. Like waves on the Bosphorus, it goes on and on. Then, someone drops a scroll onto your lap with a smirk and says, "Enjoy." You unroll it. It's a marriage contract between a minor noble and someone whose name has clearly been redacted with thick ink, replaced with the phrase, "politically sensitive." Oh boy. You stare at the marriage contract like it's going to burst in the flames and save you from reading it. The ink's still damp from being redacted by someone who clearly didn't know how to blot properly. There's smudged text everywhere, like a jellyfish tried to sign it. The bride's name has been blacked out, but whoever did the editing left enough visible letters to guess it's probably someone from that family. You know the one. The one that got into that awkward theological slap fight with the patriarch's nephew last month. Byzantine high society at its finest. Nikitas peeks over the edge of your scroll and whispers, "Bet you 5 numismata the groom's mother demanded a dowry exemption." "She always does," you mutter. You scan the rest of the contract. It's a standard template, estates listed, livestock enumerated, a suspiciously optimistic fertility clause. Then, toward the bottom, you spot the kicker. Subject to exemption from the recent imperial poultry tax. Ah, there it is. Turns out the chicken tax has already wormed its way into marriage law. You scribble a polite rejection. No one is exempt unless they personally married a member of the Imperial Livestock Review Board, and even then it's debatable, and send the scroll down the chute. Another day, another couple bound together in financial spite. But no time to dwell. The clock, read the sun crawling across the moldy window arch, is ticking toward midday. And here it comes, the lunch bell. It's not an actual bell, of course. It's the sound of Theophanes the janitor dragging his creaky broom across the floor. That's the sign. That's when everyone casually stands up and tries to pretend they weren't counting the minutes. You stretch your back. Bad idea. It pops like an ancient hinge. Still, you're free. Well, temporarily free. You grab your coin pouch and your lunch token, a thin piece of wood that smells like dried soup, and follow the trickle of civil servants down the hallway. The mess hall is located 2 floors down and smells like someone roasted a pigeon inside a damp boot. Historians still argue whether Byzantine office workers had a regulated lunch schedule or just operated under whoever yells the least gets to eat first. Today, it seems to be the latter. You squeeze into the communal bench between a tax adjudicator. On the table in front of you, a wooden bowl of lentil stew, 3 olives, and what might generously be described as bread. Mikatas plops down beside you, already mid-story. And so she tells the census clerk, "That's not my cow. That's a gift from St. Nicholas." He laughs. No one else does. You chew in silence, staring into your lentils like they might give you guidance. Across the room, a heated debate erupts. "You can't tax the church," someone yells. "I'm not taxing the church, I'm taxing the bakery behind the church," another voice snaps. "But the bakery is operated by monks. And they sell custard pies. That's not charity." You sigh and sip your vinegar wine. It burns slightly on the way down. but at least it's a distraction from whatever that thing floating in your soup is. You poke it. It pokes back. Suddenly, a young intern crashes onto the bench beside you, flailing out of breath and holding a stack of crumpled forms like he just fled the siege of Nicaea. "They're arguing about the Latin seals again," he gasps. You groan. Here we go. The seal debate is eternal. It erupts roughly once a month, and it's always the same. Some departments still use Latin phrasing on official stamps, while others insist on Greek. Every time it turns into a screaming match about tradition, translation, and whether Rome technically still exists. You whisper, "Let it die." He looks at you, wide-eyed. "They're saying Latin is more binding." Mikatas snorts wine through his nose. Fun fringe tidbit. One surviving office memo from the early 900s reads, "Henceforth all seals shall be in Greek, except those deemed too old to be changed, too holy to be challenged, or too confusing to decipher," which basically means, do what you want, just stop writing memos about it. You wolf down the last of your bread, which mostly resembles a flat pebble that's been kissed by yeast, and stand up. Lunch is over. Not by rule, but by collective exhaustion. Everyone's eyes glaze over at the same time, and you shuffle back to your desk like a line of doomed turtles heading for another scroll tide. Back upstairs, your ink has crusted into a paste. You stir it gently with your stylus and say a small prayer to the saints of legibility. The air's thick now. Someone lit a beeswax candle that's mixing with the ink fumes. You're either slightly inspired or slightly hallucinating. Hard to say. And that's when it happens. A courier slams into the partition beside you like a bad omen on sandals. He's holding a new dispatch, chest heaving. "Urgent," he wheezes. "It's from the Department of Grain." You take it with a nod and immediately regret opening it. The scroll is enormous, triple sealed, smells like barley. Inside, a formal protest against the chicken tax. Again. This time, it's from the Grain Logistics Council, who claim that taxing chickens reduces egg output, which reduces...
The logic is shaky at best, but the council has teeth, and more dangerously, clerks, who know how to write really long memos. You're going to have to respond. Carefully. You grab a new parchment, smooth it flat, and begin. To the esteemed and ever-flourishing Department of Grain. While we understand your noble efforts to ensure the imperial diet remains firm and regular, you pause. That sounds weird. You cross it out. The rest of the response takes you 20 minutes, 3 drafts, and 1 minor outburst where you throw a wax seal across the room. It sticks to the janitor. He doesn't blink. Your head hurts. Your sandals are sticky. Your lentils are staging a comeback. And the afternoon has only just begun. You stare blankly at the half-written letter to the Department of Grain, wondering if they'll notice you referred to their latest memo as egg-centric. You leave it in. If they're going to hurl bird-based logistics at you all day, you're allowed 1 terrible pun. Maybe even 2. A shadow crosses your desk. Nikitas, again. His arms are folded, his expression conspiratorial. "You coming to the hallway today?" You blink. Why? He leans in. They're arguing. Again. You sigh. Who? Fiscal registry versus ecclesiastical exemptions. He grins, like he's announcing a chariot race. Someone tried to classify a bishop's villa as a public bathhouse. You push your chair back. You've earned a break, or at least a change in the flavor of misery. The hallway outside the record offices is long, echoey, and absolutely not meant for public debates. But it's where all the best chaos happens. 2 clumps of bureaucrats are already squaring off under the flickering torch sconces. On one side, Marinos from the registry, armed with a fistful of tax codes. On the other, Sister Philophia, a sharp-eyed nun with the confidence of 5 legions and the scroll receipts to back it up. "It is not taxable," she's saying, in a voice that cuts stone. "It's a spiritual retreat." Marinos, undeterred, waves his papers. "It has a heated bath and 3 lemon trees. That's not spiritual, that's leisure." You sip from a chipped clay cup someone left on a windowsill. The wine inside tastes like regret, but it dulls the headache. This is the Byzantine Empire at its most Byzantine, where a monastery can be a spa, a bathhouse can claim saintly immunity, and a lemon tree might trigger a full-scale audit. Sister Philophia, unblinking, says, "I will escalate this to the Patriarch." Marinos counters, "I'll escalate it to the Urban Sanitation Board." And a collective "ooh" echoes down the hallway. That's the nuclear option. The Urban Sanitation Board keeps records on everything, and they're not afraid to weaponize mildew reports. Historians still argue whether religious property exemptions were a practical necessity or a loophole so wide with unusually pious chickens. The argument fizzles into bitter muttering. You wander back toward your office, half watching a junior scribe try to copy a property register with one hand while eating a pomegranate with the other. Spoiler, it's not going well. Back at your desk, you find a new scroll has arrived. It's anonymous. That's never good. You unroll it with the delicacy of a man diffusing a beehive. Inside, in beautifully stylized uncial script, is a single sentence. Who decided to reassign all the barley forms to me? No name, no signature, just pure, inky rage. You scribble, "Not it," in the margin, and toss it into the internal complaint box, which is just a drawer labeled, "Definitely not the incinerator." You consider sneaking away. You really do. But just as you're about to make a run for the archive room and hide behind the map shelves, your desk receives another delivery. It's thick, rolled tightly, smells faintly of cloves and passive aggression. You brace yourself. Inside, a full 14-page fiscal report from the outer themes. You skim the summary and feel your stomach drop. They're requesting a revision of the imperial measuring units again. Again. They claim the current standards don't account for mountain air density or wool fluffiness ratios. The Ketis leans over and mutters, "Didn't they try to measure goats in handfuls last year?" "They called it organic counting," you mutter. He cackles. You do not. A fringe tidbit? One surviving rural report actually includes the phrase, "Our wool is heavier in the heart and should be weighed accordingly." That's not accounting. That's poetry. You're not qualified for poetry. You barely survived last month's bean weight in moist climates scandal. You reach for your wax seals only to find that your blue one, the special one used for minor but urgent decisions, is missing. You turn around. It's on Niketis's desk. He shrugs. "I was using it for decoration." You don't have the energy to be mad. You just take it back and hope it's not stuck to old cheese again. The day drags. Slowly. You process a land deed with 4 different signatures and a footnote accusing someone of sorcery, standard. Then flip through a death registry that someone doodled a pelican onto. You transcribe 3 tax entries and a formal complaint about a windy outhouse. You are drowning in minutia. Then you hear it. Faintly. Marching. You freeze. Because marching means inspection. The Ministry of Record Keeping sometimes sends supervisors. No warning, no schedule, just the sound of sandals slapping in perfect rhythm down the hall. You sit up straight. You hide the bread crust in your drawer. You arrange your scrolls into the illusion of order. The door creaks.
His eyebrow twitches, just once. You hold your breath. He nods. And they leave. The air deflates like a week-old wineskin. Niketis slides back down in his chair like a melting candle. Someone across the room actually applauds. You reward yourself with the last raisin from your lunch pouch. This is survival. This is triumph. This is whatever the opposite of glory is, but with snacks. The sun shifts. The air thickens. You settle back into your chair as the weight of the afternoon falls on your shoulders like an overfed cat. Still 3 hours to go? Still 5 scrolls on your desk? Still a faint smell of cloves and mildew in the air? Welcome to the Empire. Your chair creaks as you lean back, not because it's old, though it is ancient enough to have its own lineage, but because every part of this building, including the furniture, seems determined to remind you that comfort is not part of the imperial budget. You rub the spot on your back where the splintered wood has fused with your soul, and then glance at the next scroll. Of course, it's the poultry tax again. This one's from a merchant near the Golden Gate, claiming he shouldn't have to pay it because his chickens are artistic and used in performative storytelling. He's attached a testimonial from a local actor, 2 rough sketches of chickens in what appears to be togas, and, somehow, a receipt for a sold-out puppet show. You sigh, deeply. And here's the thing. Byzantine law is just vague enough that this might count. Performance animals have exemptions in some provinces. Chickens dressed as saints? There's precedent. Somewhere. Probably in a footnote written by a monk who'd had one too many cups of raisin wine. Historians still argue whether Byzantine tax law was intentionally obtuse or simply evolved into an overcomplicated beast over centuries of edits, exceptions, and panic rewrites. One theory suggests that ambiguity was a feature, not a bug, so local officials could interpret it based on context, which basically means however we're feeling that day. You flag the scroll as pending clarification, and add a side note, please provide chicken performance schedule. You also draw a tiny mask next to the seal, just to make someone down the line smile, or scream. As you roll it up, you glance around the office and realize something odd. It's quiet. Too quiet. No scribes arguing about ink purity. No Nicetus narrating the lives of provincial tax officials like a gossip bard. No sudden scroll-related injuries. Just the scratching of styluses and the occasional distant cough that might be coming from a pigeon. The lull is suspicious. You know this silence. It's the hush before either catastrophe or cake. You stand. And then you hear it. A rustle, a whisper, and a thud from the archive room. You shuffle down the corridor, past 2 unmanned desks and a candle that's melted into the shape of the Virgin Mary, unintentional but now considered a miracle, and push.
The archive room is a crypt of scrolls. Towers of parchment reach toward the ceiling like papery stalagmites. The air smells like dust, ambition, and last year's audit. Somewhere beneath the layers, you hear soft muttering. You inch forward. There he is, Megas, the oldest scribe in the office, crouched in a sea of scrolls, surrounded by ledgers he's probably been organizing since Emperor Leo VI was still teething. His beard is in 2 braids. His ink-stained fingers tremble as he holds up a scroll that looks very old. He squints at you. This one's cursed. You blink. Pardon? He lifts it. Every time someone tries to file it, they either misplace it, misread it, or accidentally catch fire. Accidentally catch fire? Once, he says solemnly. Just once. But it happened. You take the scroll gingerly. It's from 843 CE and appears to be a tithe dispute involving icon painters, a jealous monk, and one very confusing fish market. There's a note on it that simply says, "Do not process after Lent." You hand it back. Let's just shelve that one permanently. He nods, reverently, and mutters a prayer in Old Church Slavonic.
A fringe historical note. Some archivists genuinely believe scrolls could be cursed. Not metaphorically cursed, literally cursed. There's a 9th century memo from a cleric in Cappadocia warning others not to touch a certain tithe register, lest their crops fail and goats speak in riddles. You wish you were kidding. You shuffle back to your desk, passing the window just as the sky starts to darken with incoming clouds. Perfect. Rain. Because what's a Byzantine workday without humidity and the smell of wet parchment? You resume your tasks. Scroll after scroll, each one somehow worse than the last. A widow from Thessaly demanding her dowry be refunded in goats because they were superior goats. A noble's cousin requesting a tax deduction because he now identifies as land adjacent. A monastery submitting a receipts ledger that includes miraculous wheat appearance as income. And then the scroll. It's red-sealed. Palace-level urgent. You exhale slowly and open it. It's a requisition list. For candles. Specifically, 49 ceremonial beeswax candles, each of exact height, weight, and sanctioned scent, to be delivered to the imperial chapel by first light tomorrow. The document includes 6 diagrams, 2 conflicting measurements, and a footnote that simply reads, "Do not disappoint her radiance." You consider crawling under your desk and living there now. Historians still debate whether the Byzantine imperial household actually used this many candles, or whether candle requisitions were just a long-running imperial inside joke. Some records suggest the empress once had an entire archive lit purely by candlelight for aesthetic reasons. Others claim half the candles were redistributed as unofficial bribes. Either way, someone has to copy this order 5 times, translate it into ceremonial Greek, and attach it to a requisition chain involving no fewer than 3 supply clerks and 1 monk with a cart. Guess who's the lucky first link? You mutter something inappropriate in Latin and start drafting. While you write, the storm rolls in. Rain patters against the window with growing intensity. You can hear someone cursing as they scramble to pull scroll crates away from the leaky ceiling tile near the east wall. Nikitas returns, soaked, holding a soggy appointment notice. "Found this outside. It says you're due for a review." You blink. "A performance review." He nods, dripping. "Today. Like, right now." You look down at your soaked tunic, ink-stained hands, and 5 unfinished scrolls. Of course. You smooth your hair, grab your least wrinkled parchment, and make your way down the corridor toward the Office of Bureaucratic Evaluations. Every step squishes. Every squish sounds like failure. You knock once, twice. "Enter," says a voice that has never once smiled. "Here goes everything."
You step into the Office of Bureaucratic Evaluations, like a man walking into his own lightly scented funeral. The room is too clean, too organized. The scroll racks are perfectly aligned, the seal stamps are sorted by imperial priority and color-coded with suspicious precision. A bowl of dried figs sits untouched on the edge of the desk, intimidating in its neatness. And behind that desk, sharp-nosed and sharper-eyed, is Eupraxia. Your supervisor, your nemesis, your nightmare in human sandals. She doesn't look up as you enter, just gestures vaguely toward the bench across from her with the air of someone summoning a pest control team. You sit. The bench is narrow, deliberately uncomfortable, and appears to be designed to discourage confidence. Your knees knock together, the cushion squeaks ominously under your weight, like it knows you haven't filed that overdue seal ledger from Cappadocia. Eupraxia finally raises her gaze. It lands on you like a tax notice. "Well," she says, in a tone normally reserved for diplomatic condemnations. "Let's begin." She flips through a stack of parchment with the kind of deliberate slowness that makes you want to scream, cry, and confess all your sins to a passing priest. "You've handled 3 dozen filings this week," she begins, tapping the stack. 17 of them involve livestock." You nod. "It's poultry season." "Yes," she says. "So I see." She flips to the next scroll. "Explain this line. Chicken performance schedule pending." You clear your throat. "It's part of a tax exemption appeal. A merchant is claiming his chickens are performers." She looks at you for a long moment. You're pretty sure she doesn't blink. "Is this a documented classification?" "There's some precedent from the Thracian circus registers." Her quill hovers, poised between commendation and involuntary transfer. "And this," she continues, "this requisition for ceremonial candles?" You nod again. "Palace dispatch, very urgent." "I counted 6 versions." "Yes, I had to cross-check scent specifications with the monk who..." She waves a hand. "I'm not interested in the monk." No one ever is. Eupraxia leans forward. "Do you like this job?"
Your mouth opens, closes, reopens. I endure this job. For a moment, just one brief, flickering second, you think you see something almost human behind her expression, a glimmer of recognition, of understanding. Then it's gone. Your writing is legible, your seals are mostly aligned, your ink usage has stabilized. That's adequate. She taps her stylus against the scroll. But you're still behind on the Eastern Marsh type audit. I've been reassigned 3 times this month. Excuses are not scrolls, she says. They hold no value here. You resist the urge to roll your eyes hard enough to dislodge a retina. Instead, you nod. Again. So much nodding.
She holds it between her fingers like she might flick it into a fire. Then, without ceremony, she drops it into your lap. Continue as you were, she says. Dismissed. You stand, bow slightly, and back out of the office like a man who just survived a lion petting zoo. Back in the corridor, you exhale. Deeply. You didn't get reassigned to chicken inventory. You didn't get conscripted into the pigeon census. You're still here. Still surviving. Niketis is waiting by your desk. How bad was it, he asks, nibbling on a crumbly biscuit that smells faintly of despair. I only lost half my dignity, you mutter. Nice. He raises his biscuit in solemn toast. You return to your scroll pile. It has not shrunk. In fact, you're pretty sure it has grown. New forms, fresh complaints, a papyrus strip with a stain that looks suspiciously like jam. You pull one scroll from the middle, read it, blink. It's an official request to verify the authenticity of a plague exemption charm, worn by a local baker who claims her bread has never gone moldy thanks to holy crumbs. You stare. Then, you begin drafting the reply. The Office of Official Amulets does not currently recognize bread-based prophylactics, but thank you for your culinary devotion to public health. You seal it, you move on. Another scroll. This one from a provincial judge who insists that recent tax assessments unfairly penalize those with more windows. He believes glass is a symbol of moral clarity and should be rewarded with fiscal leniency. You consider it for half a second, then write back. Your appeal has been filed under seasonal lunacy. A fringe tidbit, there's a real record of a magistrate requesting tax exemptions for his goat sheds because he decorated them with religious icons. He argued the goats had developed a contemplative nature. The empire is vast. The empire is weird. You rub your eyes. The sun's already sliding down past the palace rooftops, casting golden light through the murky windows. It hits your desk at just the right angle to highlight every single scroll you haven't touched yet. You don't panic. You don't cry. You just accept. This is the Byzantine condition. Niketis taps your shoulder. Want to join the others in the courtyard? You blink. There are others? He nods. Some of the junior clerks are playing Name That Heresy. First to misidentify 3 doctrines has to write tomorrow's incense inventory. You glance at your pile. You glance at the window. You stand. Let's go. As you pass the main corridor, you see 2 monks playing chess with broken wax seals. A pigeon sits atop the scribe ledger shelf, smug and unchallenged. Someone's left a note pinned to the office suggestions box. Fewer chickens, more wine. You step into the courtyard and let the fading sunlight warm your face. For one glorious moment, you remember that you are not a scroll. You are a person. And tomorrow, you will once again refuse a tax appeal involving sainted goat.
You return from the courtyard with a stomach full of watered wine and a brain full of theological misfires. Niketis had confidently declared that monophysitism involved only eating one type of fish, and the junior clerk who lost the game is currently sketching how many fingers of incense qualify as a handful. You feel almost refreshed. Almost. Back at your desk, a fresh batch of scrolls has arrived like a bad harvest. You didn't even hear the courier. They must be training them to materialize. You sit down, adjust your tunic, and brace for round 3, or possibly 5, of the never-ending bureaucratic coliseum. The first scroll is deceptively small. You unroll it slowly as if it might explode or insult your lineage. It's from the Office of Weights and Sacred Standards. Of course it is. They're upset, again, that regional inspectors are using slightly different measurements for taxation based on which province they're in, which official is present, and how humid it is.
They've submitted a 16-point complaint, complete with diagrams comparing imperial standard loaves to actual bread submitted from Cappadocia, which appears to be more air than food. You rub your temples. You remember this fight. It never ends. Historians still argue whether the Byzantines had a truly standardized system of weights and measures, or if it was more of a polite fiction everyone agreed to pretend was enforceable. Some evidence suggests that the actual standard loaf was locked in a vault and never shown to anyone, just to avoid arguments. Genius, honestly. You draft a reply on reflex. In light of regional inconsistencies, we recommend loaves be weighed post-baking but pre-blessing to avoid spiritual inflation. Use the marble balance scale when possible. And please stop sending bread samples by pigeon. They do not survive the journey. You seal it with your now slightly lopsided wax stamp and file it away. Next up, a scroll from the Imperial Court's Entertainment Office. That's rare. You open it with curiosity and just a dash of dread. It's a requisition for temporary exemptions for 3 mimes, 2 acrobats, and a donkey that allegedly plays the lyre. They're being sent to perform for a feast honoring St. Thecla's miraculous rainstorm, and the office is requesting clearance so they don't have to pay performer taxes for the donkey. You stare at the scroll for a moment. A mime, an acrobat, and a donkey that plays the lyre. You begin writing before you even finish laughing. Performance exemption granted for duration of the St. Thecla festivities. However, any musical claims involving animals must be demonstrated in person before the Ministry of Audible Miracles. Fringe tidbit of the day.
Byzantium was nothing if not flexible. As you finish sealing the mime donkey scroll, Nikitas leans over with a fresh piece of chaos. Someone's lost the Thracian census ledger. You blink. The Thracian ledger? He nods. The one with the annotations. And the doodle of the duck. You stand up like a man preparing for battle. That ledger has gone missing before. Twice, actually, and both times ended in disaster. One time, someone tried to forge a backup from memory and accidentally doubled the population of a fishing village. The other time, the ledger showed up 3 weeks later, wedged inside a broken archangel statue. You round the corner toward the storage room, heart pounding, and immediately run into Eudokia. She's sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by scrolls, calmly eating honeyed almonds. "I didn't lose it," she says before you say anything. "You're sitting on it." She looks down, shrugs. "It was soft." You extract the ledger with all the dignity of a man pulling a baby out of a basket. The duck doodle is still intact. You cradle it like a sacred relic and march it back to your desk, victorious and slightly sticky. Once seated again, you return to your pile. The next scroll is, oh no, a map correction request. These are the worst. You unroll it with the trembling resignation of a man entering a room full of cats while wearing fish shoes. Inside, a request from a minor official in the theme of Hellas claiming that the imperial map incorrectly places the village of Lathros 10 feet too far south, which he argues causes confusion during tithe season and makes him look cartographically incompetent. He's even included his own map, drawn by hand, featuring 3 olive trees, a bathhouse, and what looks like an aggressively smiling donkey. You write back, your concerns are noted. Please refrain from redrawing imperial maps with livestock-based landmarks. Official placement of Lathros shall remain as is, until further cartographic clarification from the Ministry of Directional Affairs. You tuck it into the outgoing scroll pile and sigh. Again. There's a knock at your partition. You look up. It's the monk from earlier, the one who's always hovering near the archives, the one who once tried to submit a hymn as a tax receipt. He holds up a scroll. This one's odd. You take it. It's thick, heavier than it should be. You unroll it slowly and blink. Inside is a complete handwritten play, in poetic verse, starring Emperor Constantine VII as a tragic hero trying to organize a census while being thwarted by talking goats, cursed paperwork, and a ghost who only speaks in Latin legal codes. You look up. The monk is grinning. I call it the Scroll of Sorrows. Think the Empress would sponsor it? You hand it back.
The flicker of oil lamps now dances on every wall. Shadows lengthen. Your scroll pile finally, mercifully, starts to shrink. One more form. A weather complaint from a grain inspector in Galatia who claims the clouds are personally conspiring against me. You nod, slowly. Aren't they always? The lamp oil sputters as you tilt the clay vessel, trying to coax one last flicker from the flame. The light wobbles. So does your grip on reality. The last hour of the day is a cursed time, where time bends, ink smudges itself, and every scroll feels longer than the Alexiad. You press on. Next scroll, a double-entry tax audit from Charcian. You read the first line, and immediately wish you hadn't. It's written in such ornate script that it looks like the writer was trying to seduce the parchment. You squint. The numbers don't add up. According to this audit, someone paid 3 times the tax for owning exactly 0 pigs, but claims a refund for 5 pigs. There's a diagram of pigs, not numbers, and beneath it, a note in the margin. Drawn from memory, pig count may vary. You stare at the scroll and contemplate how many careers have ended in a pig-related scandal. Nicetus leans over. Pig refund? You nod. Better than last week's eel subsidy mix-up. You shudder. The eel incident. Historians still argue whether Byzantine dietary taxes were actually enforced or simply existed to give bureaucrats something to write about while avoiding actual math. What is known? The eel was taxed as both fish and luxury good, unless smoked, in which case it was briefly exempt as a preserved blessing. You're not sure who came up with that, but you're pretty sure they now haunt the inkpots. You write back. Pig tax overpayments require physical verification of absence. Please provide signed affidavit from local swineherd confirming total piglessness. Scroll sealed. Sent. You wipe your brow. The heat from the lamps makes the air feel like soup. Your ink is drying faster than your patience. Still, you reach for the next scroll. This one's smaller. Handwritten. Frayed at the edges. Inside. A complaint from a tax official whose office ceiling is apparently leaking wax. Not from candles, from bees. Wild bees. Who have moved in and established a monastic hive. He's included a rough drawing of the beehive, nestled beside a crucifix, and labeled it Blessed Buzzing Sanctuary. You consider forwarding it to the Department of Natural Omens, but then you remember. It was disbanded after the goat comet panic. You write back anyway. While we appreciate the symbolic resonance of divine bees, please...
You both lose a full minute to silent laughter, the kind that only comes from surviving a workplace built entirely out of scrolls, prayers, and bureaucratic delusion. Then, inevitably, your moment of joy ends. A junior clerk slams into the partition wall, panting like he just ran from the walls of Theodosius. "Emergency!" he gasps, holding up a bundle of papers. You snatch them with the reflexes of a startled goat. Inside, a notice of upcoming inspections. Imperial inspection. Not just the normal patrol. This one involves someone with authority. You glance at the margin. The inspector's name? Irenaeus Komnenos. You choke a little on your own breath. Not because you know him personally, but because everyone knows him. Komnenos is a legend in the civil service.
He once ordered a tax office shut down for filing by candlelight during daylight hours. He insists on silence during audits. He's nicknamed the Unblinking Scroll. He's due tomorrow. You scan the notice. He wants ledger reconciliation from the past 3 months, documentation of every seal used in the past 10 days, dust reports from the archive room, a sample of morale strategies. You look up at Niketas. Do we have morale strategies? He thinks for a second. Does pretending to be dead count? You snort and begin organizing. First, the seal ledger. Then, cross-referencing requisitions. The last 3 months are a swamp of overlapping formats, half-completed notes, and one unsigned scroll that just says help in 3 languages. But you keep going. This is the sacred dance of the civil servant, sifting through chaos, aligning columns, decoding panic handwriting, and praying to Saint Methodios, patron of efficient filing.
Fringe tidbit: there actually was a minor saint adopted in the 11th century, known for his unusually clean record keeping. His only miracle? A 5-year ledger with no duplicate entries. You consider lighting a candle for him. Your hand cramps. You massage your wrist. You keep going. Next scroll, a complaint about a blessed fountain that's been classified as a taxable water source. The villagers are furious. They claim the fountain healed a dog once, and therefore shouldn't be taxed. You scribble. While canine-based miracles are noted, water remains taxable if it flows through official channels. Suggest reclassification to inspirational trickle. Niketas tosses you a date. Dry, shriveled, and suspiciously sticky. You eat it anyway. It's better than parchment. Another scroll. This one's just confusing. It's a poem, a complaint written as a poem. From someone in the fish inspection office, lamenting how no one respects his tax assessments because he smells distinctly. You sit in the glow of your flickering lamp, surrounded by sealed dispatches, errant scribbles, and the lingering scent of ink and dried fruit. Niketas yawns behind you. Think he'll shut us down? Who, Comnenus? You say. Nah, he'll just yell about the bees. He grins. Let's hide the mime donkey scroll. Agreed. Outside, thunder rumbles. Rain begins to fall again, tapping the glass like a nervous inspector. You stretch, pop your back, and rise. Another day of imperial bureaucracy, filed, sealed, and survived.
The morning arrives like a slap from a damp sandal. You're barely awake, standing in your usual tunic that smells faintly of candle wax and stale ink, staring at the office door with the same enthusiasm a condemned man has for his final meal of lentils. Behind that door, Erinaios Komnenos, the inspector, the man, the myth, the aggressively punctual legend. You haven't even sipped your morning barley brew when you hear it, the sound of his staff tapping rhythmically against the corridor tiles, announcing his imperial presence like the world's least whimsical parade. Tap, tap, tap. Niketas hisses from behind the scroll racks. He's early. Of course he is. You straighten your posture. You smooth your tunic. You remember to breathe. And then the door opens. There he stands, tall, stone-faced, in a robe so precisely folded, it might have been ironed by angels. No jewelry, no flair, just the cold gaze of a man who dreams in tax codes and finds joy in margin alignment. Inspection, he says flatly. You nod and gesture to the prepared desk of doom, where you've laid out the seal logs, ledger copies, and a decoy scroll labeled Emotional Inventory, in the hopes of confusing him. He doesn't laugh. He sits. Komnenos begins the review without ceremony. His quill,
black and sharp, glides across the parchment with the precision of a blade. He asks no questions. He simply reads and marks and occasionally sighs, like he's disappointed not by errors, but by your existence. You hand him the scroll detailing your use of 3 blue wax seals for urgent inter-office humor relief. He doesn't blink. He moves on. Niketas coughs. You glare at him. Then, Komnenos speaks.
This record, monastic bee relocation, was it approved through appropriate channels? You nod slowly. We tried the Department of Living Saints, but they're still debating the hive's theological implications. He scribbles something. You pray it wasn't transfer to salt mines. Historians still argue whether imperial inspectors like Komnenos had real punitive power or just inspired fear through sheer disapproval. Anecdotal evidence suggests that several provincial officials voluntarily resigned just to avoid having to explain miraculous grain duplication to his face. You slide the incense inventory across the desk. He sniffs, literally. Too much myrrh, he mutters. He's right, but how dare he? Next comes the morale report. You hand it over slowly, knowing full well it's a disaster. It contains a summary of yesterday's heresy guessing game, a sketch of Niketas wearing a scroll as a cape, a list of approved workplace chants including seal it or feel it and audit me gently. Komnenos reads it all, wordlessly, then sets it aside. No mention of standard prayer hour, he says. You clear your throat. We chant internally. He raises one eyebrow, barely. The kind of eyebrow movement that makes entire villages consider restructuring. Outside, the rain begins again, harder this time. The sound slaps against windows like fate being petty. You reach for the final scroll, the archive dust report. It's simple. You even drew a diagram of the sneeze zones. He reads it, nods once. That's good? Then he stands. Silence. You swallow hard. He finally speaks. This office is disorganized, informal, borderline irreverent. You nod, heart sinking. But, he adds, your filing is clean. The numbers match, and I have not found any fabricated goats, this time. He steps toward the door. Just before exiting, he turns. The donkey scroll. Burn it. You nod quickly. Already done, sir. Liar, he mutters, and walks out. The door closes. You collapse into your chair. Niketas peers over your partition like a curious weasel. Did we pass? You shrug. We exist. That's enough. He throws a stale biscuit at your head. Survival is victory, my friend. You eat the biscuit. It tastes like success and dust. The rest of the morning flows in a surreal haze. After Komnenos, everything else feels like a warm bath of mediocrity. You review 3 more land assessments, one scroll claiming a vineyard has moved 5 meters due to seasonal plate shifting, and a complaint from a monk who says his fellow brother keeps hiding olives in his sandals. You respond with your usual grace. Relocate the vineyard cartographically. Do not relocate the sandals gastronomically. Then you file it and forget it. That's your magic trick, turning madness into documentation. By midday, the office is buzzing again. Niketas is reenacting Komnenos' inspection walk using a broken chair leg as a staff. Eudokia is smudging away ink stains using lemon peels.
Someone has drawn an extremely detailed fish on the lunch ledger.
You sigh, content in the absurdity. Fringe tidbit. There's a fragment of an actual 11th century letter where one scribe thanks another for preserving sanity through irreverent scribbles. Scholars believe it was part of a wider office culture of doodling saints and vegetables to maintain morale. As the hour drags on, the courier returns, sopping wet, clutching scrolls like they might dissolve if anyone looks at them too hard. You wave him in. He drops the batch on your desk and shivers. Storm's getting worse. You glance out the window. The street outside is a river. A man in a tunic and sandals is trying to steer a cart using a curtain as a sail. Welcome to summer, you mutter. You unroll the first new scroll. It's from the Temple Administration Board. They're asking for clarification on whether baptisms held during solar eclipses are subject to additional lighting charges. You don't know what that means. You're not sure they do either. You scribble, please consult the astronomical liturgy calendar.
If shadows are longer than the font, fee exemption applies. Nikitas laughs. You make it sound like science. I make it sound like done, you reply. The last scroll of the hour is from a vineyard near the Bosphorus. They claim a local saint appeared in a wine barrel and demanded that their tax be redirected toward better hymn acoustics. You stare at it for a long time, then reply, while divine messages are taken seriously, all wine-based revelations must be verified sober. We suggest a 3-day audit of barrel content and chorus quality. And just like that, it's mid-afternoon again. The lamps are dimming, the scrolls are piling, but you survived Komnenos. You survived morning. And as Nikitas hums the seal it or feel it chant under his breath, you realize you're not even dreading tomorrow. Not yet. The rain continues, thick and steady, as if Olympus itself left the tap running. You lean back in your creaky chair, staring at a ceiling that drips with imperial indifference. Somewhere in the rafters, a pigeon coughs. You're fairly certain that shouldn't be possible, but you're too tired to fight the laws of nature, or the tax code. The latest scroll lands on your desk with a moist plop. It's from the Ministry of Maritime Affairs, and you already know it's going to be trouble. You unroll it slowly, careful not to smudge the ink or awaken whatever damp demon it may contain. Ah, a shipping manifest dispute. Apparently, a merchant claims that a crate labeled Sacred Scrolls was in fact filled with pickled turnips. He demands a religious tax exemption for the cargo, arguing the turnips were dedicated to the Virgin before fermentation. You pause, reread. Yes, that's what it says. This isn't even the weird part. Attached is a short note from the dock inspector. They were excellent turnips, very spiritual in taste. You write back, while we appreciate the holiness of well-preserved root vegetables, sacred classification requires ecclesiastical oversight and a minimum of 1 hymn. Please consult your local bishop before tax exemption. Nikitas wanders by, wet from head to toe, holding a scroll above his head like an umbrella. Another miracle vegetable? Pickled turnips this time, he nods solemnly. Still better than the prophet onion incident. You both fall silent, remembering the time someone claimed their onion wept when taxes were raised. Historians still argue whether these bizarre claims were genuine expressions of belief or clever bureaucratic theater. Fringe scholars even suggest the Byzantines viewed bureaucracy itself as a kind of sacred ritual, with scrolls acting as relics and signatures functioning like prayers. You can believe it. Some days, it really does feel like you're just praying in paperwork. Another scroll, this one from the Imperial Grain Commission. The grain office is always dramatic. Their complaint? Pigeons are stealing their samples. Not some pigeons, organized pigeons. Possibly trained. Possibly sponsored by rival grain cooperatives. There's a diagram included showing a bird mid-heist. You sigh deeply. Please install netting over the inspection window. Additionally, tax penalties may not be waived due to avian interference unless accompanied by witness testimony and feather samples. You're halfway through stamping the seal when the room goes dark. Not ominously dark, just candle flicker. We forgot to pay the light tithe dark. You grope for a fresh taper and strike a spark. As the flame returns, it casts shadows across the walls like flickering saints. You whisper a quick thanks to Saint Basil the Illuminated, patron of well-lit offices. Nikitas returns holding a steaming mug of something. You hope it's barley tea and not a mistake from the dye shelf again. He slumps into the chair beside you. You ever wonder what would have happened if we joined the army instead? You snort. We'd be dead. Or worse, logistics officers. He raises his mug in salute. Another scroll lands in your in tray, delivered by Eudokia, who seems mildly amused. This one's for you, she says, sliding it over. You break the seal. It's personal.
A request from your cousin, the one who lives in a tiny coastal village and once tried to sell blessed fish scales to a passing bishop. He wants your help getting his sea cave exempt from property tax. Yes, his sea cave. Apparently, he's turned it into a monastic reflection chamber, complete with borrowed icons, one leaky lantern, and a mildly confused hermit. You stare at the scroll for a long time, then reply, "While sea caves may promote spiritual clarity, tax exemptions require permanent roofing, legal entry paths, and at least 3 unrelated witnesses who have not been bribed with salted mackerel." You add a doodle of a fish shrine in the corner. It's childish, but it helps. Nikitas chuckles. They always try the sea cave angle. It's the humidity. Makes people bold. Suddenly the door bursts open and a drenched clerk stumbles in. "Emergency filing," he gasps, holding up a crimson-sealed scroll. You snatch it, read, blink. It's from the Empress's steward. Requesting urgent documentation of all official religious processions from the last quarter, including route maps, priest rosters, incense quantities, and a log of all relics carried, with miracle ratings. You resist the urge to scream. Instead, you flip.
Of course you have this data, but it's not organized.
Half of it's in marginal notes, some's in the miscellaneous marvels folder, and one parade ended with a relic being dropped into a fountain, so that's complicated. You breathe. You begin. As you scribble, your mind drifts. Not far, just to that relic, the one that fell into the fountain. It was supposed to be the sandal of a saint. The priest insisted it began glowing underwater. The archivist argued it was just reflection. Historians still debate whether this incident marked the beginning of stricter relic handling procedures or the decline of sandal-based worship. You remember the mess, the crowd, the pigeons trying to drink holy water. It was a good day. You finish the log, seal it, dispatch it, and just as you relax, another scroll. This one, however, is short. From Eupraxia. It says, "Reminder, end of season ledger review, this week." You freeze. This means one thing, the big clean. Every quarter, the office must purge duplicates, annotate questionable entries, and reseal anything that looks suspiciously spongy. It's a nightmare of resorting, relabeling, and late-night inkwell accidents. Nikitas groans behind you. Again? Always. He gets up, starts sorting boxes. You follow. The next few hours pass in a blur of parchment, wax, dust, and mild panic. You find 3 missing census slips, a list of banned metaphors, someone once compared the emperor's budget to a leaky barrel, and a note in your own handwriting that just says, "Never trust the baker from Nysa." You don't remember writing it. You believe it anyway. By the time the lamplight starts to fade again, the ledgers are in decent shape. Not perfect, never perfect, but solid. Honest, surviving. And that's what you are too. Surviving.
The next morning starts not with a sunrise, but with a gong. You bolt upright on your bench, the same hard bench you fell asleep on 3 hours ago, with a scroll as a pillow and a biscuit stuck to your cheek. Nikitas is already awake, holding a mug of something hot and judging you silently. You blink. Was that? He nods. Eupraxia's gong. She summoned the office. You groan. Didn't even know she had a gong. She borrowed it from the Monastery of Perpetual Timing. Of course she did. You scramble upright, rubbing ink off your face, straightening your robes, and trying to remember if you've done anything recently that could result in public humiliation. Probably. The biscuit falls to the floor with a soft plop. You leave it behind. It belongs to the night now. The rest of the office is gathering in the atrium, dim light filtering in through the slats, casting weird shapes on the floor. Everyone looks sleepy, confused, and mildly guilty, which is standard operating mode for imperial clerks. Then she arrives, Eupraxia, gliding in like a tax audit in human form. She's holding a small stack of scrolls and a look that could curdle wine. She clears her throat. Set has been a complication. The room holds its breath.
You consider faking a fainting spell. A recent series of tax exemption requests filed in this office have raised questions at the highest levels. You can feel every clerk turning to look at you, because it's always you. She unrolls a scroll dramatically. Exemption 441. The sacred fungal larder of Mount Olmos. Nicetas hisses, "Oh no." You whisper, "It was a legitimate claim. The mushrooms glowed." She reads the next one. Exemption 447. Divine smoked fish tithes. You raise a finger. "That was Eudokia." She shrugs from behind a scroll tower. "They sang." Eupraxia's eyes narrow. These exemptions were approved without proper secondary clerical inspection. Now the room gasps. That's the bureaucratic equivalent of a trial without incense. She slams the scroll down. You have until the end of the day to produce all supporting documentation. All miracles must be independently verified. No metaphorical weeping, no symbolic flames, and absolutely no tax holidays for sea cucumbers. You're not sure whether to laugh, cry, or spontaneously combust. The rest of the day, a paperwork hurricane. You and Nicetas dive into every corner of the archive, pulling dusty ledgers, miracle logs, monk testimonies, even a receipt written in fish blood. You find a list of approved liturgical foods. You find a banned list of dancing relics. You do not find the documentation for the sea cucumber case. "You sure you filed it?" Nicetas asked.
We're a brilliant form of religious integration, or just a loophole race between clerks and clergy.
Some scholars believe entire cults form solely to reduce property tax.
One particularly desperate monastery once declared its outhouse holy because it purged more than just the body.
By mid-afternoon, your desk looks like it's been raided by theological raccoons.
Scrolls everywhere, wax shavings in your lap, your hands are stained with ink and possibly jam.
Then you find it, buried under a pile of monastery inventories,
Tucked between a draft census and a complaint about goose choir noise.
the original testimony of the Mount Olmos fungi.
Signed by 3 monks, stamped by the Office of Subterranean Blessings. You wave it triumphantly. Nicetas cheers. You race to compile everything. Quotes, testimonies, drawings, even a letter from a traveling bishop who felt spiritually nourished by the mycelium. You seal it all in a thick packet labeled Supplemental Evidence, Mushroom Division.
You drop it on Eupraxia's desk.
She doesn't say anything, just opens it slowly, eyes flicking over each page. Then, without looking up,
And the fish?
you groan. Back to the archives. Fringe tidbit, there is a real document from a 10th century bishop declaring salted fish an acceptable vessel for divine flavor. He also suggested fish learned humility by swimming together. The empire, in short, was never lacking imagination. You gather 5 testimonies from coastal clergy, 1 tax log showing fish were donated to the poor, blessed by proximity, and an old hymn that mentions salty praise. You don't know what that means, but it sounds convincing. Eudokia draws a small fish wearing a halo, just in case. By early evening, your office smells like anxiety and old ink. Eupraxia reads through the second packet, her expression unchanged. Then she does something you've never seen before. She sets the scroll down.
And nods.
A full, proper nod, the kind that could shake mountains,
Acceptable.
she says. You're too stunned to respond. Nicetas gasps audibly. Eudokia starts to clap, then catches herself and pretends she was just stretching. Eupraxia turns and walks away. You sit back in your chair, hard, eyes closed, limbs limp. You saw that, right? You ask. Nicetas leans in.
She didn't even write a corrective memo.
You think we're, like, okay?
No,
He grins.
but we're not doomed.
Close enough. The sun finally pierces through the gray clouds, sending a beam of light through the atrium. Dust floats in it like a slow dance of ash and parchment bits. Outside, the rain has stopped. A pigeon coos gently, perhaps offering its own approval. You lean back, fully at peace for the first time in days. Then, someone knocks at the door. You turn. It's a courier. He's holding a scroll wrapped in gold twine.
You stare at the golden twine like it might bite. Palace scrolls never bring good news. They don't use gold thread for congratulations. They use it for drama, for crises, for those thrilling, "You've been volunteered for something" moments that haunt you for months. The courier bows and vanishes, leaving the scroll on your desk like a prophecy. Niketis hovers. Open it. You don't. "Come on," he urges. "Might be another donkey opera." You groan and untie the thread with a ceremonial level of dread. The wax seal is imperial. The script is imperial. The tone is imperial. You read aloud. "By order of Her Most Illustrious and God-protected Majesty Theodora II, Empress of the Eastern Romans, you are summoned to prepare documentation for the upcoming feast of Saint Photios." You blink. That's fine? Wait, no. Said documentation must include a list of all active relics within the capital, complete with miracle history, a registry of all permitted hymns, and a proposal for a new ceremonial chant to be debuted before the imperial court. Niketis wheezes. They want us to invent a chant? They want us to invent a chant. You stare at the page. A ceremonial chant. You've never done that. You barely remember half the ones you're required to file, let alone compose new ones. There's a secondary note, smaller, in the steward's handwriting. Her Majesty requests the chant be inspiring yet tax adjacent. You sit in silence for a long, long time. Finally, you mutter, "Let's start with the relics." The relic log is a beast. Relics move constantly, paraded, blessed, stolen, returned, and occasionally misplaced during candlelight vigils. Your registry includes bones, cloaks, sandals, teeth, 3 partial, 1 complete, 2 swords, debatably saint-related, and 1 highly controversial shroud fragment that may actually be a tablecloth. Historians still argue over the authenticity of half the known relics in Constantinople. Some point to trade records showing sacred thigh bones shipped in bulk. Others note multiple churches claiming to possess the only surviving sandal of the same saint. You, personally, don't care, so long as the miracle log is legible. You and Niketis dig into the vault registry. You confirm the following.
You try writing a first line of the chant. "O blessed ledger of the light," you stop. Nope. Second attempt. "Praise be the balance, the audit divine," Niketis snorts. Sounds like financial heresy. Third try. "O coin, most circular of graces." You crumple the parchment. You've got nothing. You dig through hymnals. You look for inspiration in the scrolls. Eudokia tries chanting a Gregorian-style melody using tax codes. Article 5, Section 9, "Praise be the grain" line. But that spirals into laughter. You decide to reset. Eat something. Breathe. Then it hits you. A memory from years ago. An old monk at a village shrine, chanting to the rhythm of footsteps. A hymn to Saint Basil the Scribe, patron of calculated mercy. It was simple, clean, soft repetition, gentle cadence.
You grab fresh parchment. You write. We seal with care what time has spilled, the ink of Rome, the word fulfilled. We balance weight with hands and mind, for truth is tallied, line by line. Nicetas reads it, whistles. That's shockingly decent. You add a second verse. We count the coins, yet none are ours. We tally grace beneath the stars. It's earnest, a little cheesy, exactly what the Empress wants. You stamp it, scroll it,
And deliver it to the palace courier, who raises one eyebrow and whispers,
You're brave.
Not helpful, but it's done. By the time you return, Eudokia has taken over your desk and is drawing tiny relics with cartoon eyes. Nicetas is humming your chant and adding new verses about paper cuts and quills that break. The rain has stopped again. Sunlight cracks through the atrium roof and glints off the top of your seal case like some tiny halo of validation. You sit. You breathe. You made it through Empress orders, through Euproxia's purge, through miracle mushrooms and fish theology, and that time you almost got audited over ghost pigs. You glance at the pile of new scrolls forming near the door. Still more to do. But you know what? For the first time in weeks, you're not afraid of the parchment. Your final hour of the day unfolds like molasses dripping from a cracked amphora, slow, sticky, and vaguely medicinal. The chant is finished, the relic list delivered. The Empress hasn't summoned you for public praise or punishment, which is, statistically speaking, your best-case scenario. You're ready to coast, to file a few simple scrolls, maybe doodle a saint with exaggerated eyebrows, and mentally prepare for your nightly collapse. Then Euproxia reappears. She stands by your desk, arms folded, scroll in hand, expression carved from Mount Purgatory itself. Ah, you say, what fresh opportunity for growth do you bring? She doesn't laugh. This, she says, placing the scroll before you, is the provincial songbird tax proposal. You blink. I'm sorry? The what now? She taps the scroll. Several governors are requesting clarification on whether regional birdsong constitutes ambient benefit, and thus requires an entertainment tithe. Nicetas peeks over the partition. Is this because of that Thracian magistrate and his peacock parade? Yes, Euproxia says, and the Cappadocian owl serenades. And of course, the Peloponnesian festival of nightingales, which ended in musical litigation. You sigh. This empire. This wonderful, lunatic empire. Historians still argue whether these bird-based taxes were actually enforced, or just invented as jurisdictional jokes that spiraled too far. What's certain is that by the late 11th century, at least one edict existed classifying the rooster as a communal auditory asset. You've seen it. You filed it. You open the scroll. Inside, notes, diagrams, a wax imprint of a sparrow's foot, allegedly, and a musical transcription labeled Robin's Lament in D minor. You try not to cry. Birdsong shall not be taxed if it arises naturally from untrained creatures. However, any orchestrated avian display, especially those accompanied by lyre, drum, or incense, shall be considered a taxable spectacle. You seal it with your least dramatic wax. Nicetas offers you a roasted fig. You accept. Then, mercifully, a moment of silence. The sun slants low. The office glows in a soft orange hue. For a few blissful minutes, no one moves. The courier naps near the scroll rack. Eudokia hums the ceremonial chant under her breath. You look over the day's work, a pile of sealed scrolls, each more absurd than the last. It's beautiful. It's Byzantine. You pour yourself a weak mug of wine from the communal jug under the stairs. The clay cup smells faintly of oregano and bureaucracy. Nicetas joins you. You ever think we're just inventing this stuff? Every day. And yet, he says, raising his cup, the empire still runs.
The city exhales. Then someone screams. You both jolt upright. The scream is distant, muffled, coming from somewhere beyond the walls. Maybe a market, maybe a parade gone wrong, maybe a goat uprising. You wait. Silence again. You both sit. Nicetas shrugs. Could have been joy. You nod. Or taxation. Eudokia appears, holding the final scroll of the night. Just one more, she says. Then you're free. You accept it like it's an award, or a death sentence. Inside, a petition from a local orphanage requesting exemption from parchment fees because our children now sleep under scrolls. You read the testimonies, cramped, heartfelt. One kid included a tiny drawing of himself as a scroll knight. You smile. Approved. Imperial compassion extends beyond ledgers. Provide parchment freely until spring. Then reassess based on surplus stock and child poetry output. You draw a scroll knight of your own in the margin. Nicetas watches. You're getting soft. Just call it merciful formatting. He chuckles. You file it. And that's it. The last scroll of the day. You rise from your chair. Stretch. Groan. A quiet procession begins. Clerks tidying desks, stamping final seals, whispering last lines of prayers. The office hums like a warm lamp. You walk toward the door, footsteps light. Nicetas calls after you. Same time tomorrow? You nod. As always. He salutes with his quill. Seal it or feel it. You grin. The door creaks open. The hallway is dark. Quiet. Save for the faint echo of sandals on stone. Somewhere in the city, a bell tolls the hour. Another day is done. The empire still stands. And you, one tiny bureaucrat in an ocean of scrolls, are its quiet heartbeat. You lie back now, letting the sounds of the city soften and dissolve. The footsteps fade. The scrolls are sealed. The ink has dried. The fire, low and flickering in its cradle, casts no more shadows across your walls. Your limbs are heavy, your thoughts slower. And somewhere, in a quiet office beneath a sagging wooden roof, your desk sits exactly as you left it, scented with wax and scribbles, and the faint memory of roasted figs. The storm has passed. The pigeons have settled. The couriers sleep. Maybe the Empress dreams of processions. Maybe Nicetas dreams of dancing quills. You sleep like a stone in the archive vault, warm, forgotten, at peace. The bureaucracy of the Byzantines will march on tomorrow. More scrolls, more relics, maybe another chant, maybe a new tax on clouds. You've survived worse, but for now, the empire has gone quiet. The saints rest, the sea is calm, and somewhere deep in the stacks of this story, you are filed neatly under peaceful sleep. Approved. Breathe.
Let the candle flicker once more, let the ink fade, let the parchment curl. Tomorrow is another page,